The stories contained in this podcast are the recollections of the guests we've invited onto the show. We are an outlet for people to share their truths, and we accept no legal responsibilities for the stories contained herein.
I'm Kendra Sheets.
And I'm Rich Gill.
And this is Enough, a podcast that aims to shine light into the darkened corners of the music industry while discussing the ways we can and should improve ourselves and, in turn, our community. Welcome back to another episode of the Enough podcast. This is another episode of the section of the podcast we said at the end of 24 we weren't going to do anymore in 2025. This is Subtext. Part of the reason that we have now put out 2 episodes of Subtext in early 2025 is there's just a lot that happened at the end of 24 or early part of 25 that we felt really spoke well to what we cover here, the things we talk about, and we wanted to make sure that they were publicized all in one place for you. So this episode of Subtext is going to be a little bit different than prior episodes. We're not covering one person or one allegation. We're kind of giving you a short segmented news update of a lot of things that have happened that we've talked about or maybe we've never talked about at all. Just things that are going on in the world of allegations, I guess, of assault. You know, the world that we unfortunately spend a lot of time in these days.
A few of the things we're going to cover have a lot going on with them, and some of the stuff is currently ongoing. So instead of going super, super deep into a ton of things, we're going to go a little bit into a lot of different things. Some of these things will probably hit up in a future Subtext episode.
Yeah, these things are definitely ongoing, and we'll probably have to follow up on a few of these. So the very first thing that we're talking about on this episode is something that probably everyone, if not 99.95% of our listeners are very aware of, if not watched live when it happened. We're, of course, talking about the halftime show with Kendrick Lamar. I don't want to go too far into the details. If you're really interested in the entire beef between Kendrick and Drake, and you want it in an easily digestible and comedic manner, comedian Josh Johnson has a whole 45-minute setup about everything that happened, how we got to where we are, how they got to where they are. And ultimately, this entire thing culminated with a song that was written and released in 2025 by Kendrick called Not Like Us. And it became very, very popular. And in that song, there's a lot of straight up commentary and then also a lot of subtle, raftily woven commentary about Drake being a pedophile and a terrible human being. So the line that was heard round the world, I think, was, "Ain't you tired trying to strike a chord?" And it's probably A minor. In the song, it's phenomenally placed. It just resonates. And the way he says A minor with the tone and everything is taunting, if nothing else. But what happened was at the stadium, he did a almost 15-minute mashup of a number of his songs, including Squabble Up. And there was this kind of teasing of, are we going to play it? Is it going to happen? And then the second to last song. And people just erupted. You could just hear the stadium go. And when that line came up, the entire world, it sounded like, sang A minor at the exact same time. So that was a real twist of the knife to Drake. And this commentary about his pedophilia, I believe it stems from his past behaviors with Millie Bobby Brown and a number of other women where he was caught texting, not women at the time, but underage girls. Yeah, under 18. And from what was shared, it was supposedly support that he was giving them in welcome to the industry, I'm here for you kind of way.
A mentorship type situation.
But also there was some things that went beyond mentorship.
Yeah.
Definitely walking a very, very thin line. And this entire thing, we never touched directly on Drake in one of our Subtext episodes, but it's one of those things that, like Hollywood secrets, it reminds me of Kevin Spacey before all of the allegations came out and went super public. I used to watch this show called Difficult People, which did not give enough credit for how good I think that show was. It had Billy Eichner in it. And in the, I think, only 2 seasons of the show they consistently made comments about Spacey's interest in young boys and his lifestyle. And when all of that actually came out publicly, it was years later And it was noted that this was like an industry secret for years, like, you know, Harvey Weinstein, like all of these things. It's something that people know, they kind of turn a blind eye to because the person is of some sort of powerful position. And I feel like that's kind of what's happening here. You know, we all kind of seem to, as a conglomerate, forget about the fact that these allegations came out about Drake. I don't even know how many years ago now. I think it was pre-COVID. If not, it was during the beginning part. So we're looking at 5+ years. It just seems like everyone kind of forgot or no one cares anymore. But Kendrick cares. And if there's one person you don't want to have care about any of your business, it's Kendrick Lamar. Because he's fucking vicious if you get into his crosshairs. And we love to see what happens at the Super Bowl. And also, very recently, to the recording of this episode, Conan O'Brien, who just hosted the Oscars, made a joke about Kendrick and Drake and all of this, and Drake being a pedophile on stage at the Oscars, which has an audience of like, I don't know, what is it? 19.7 million people. So not only was it seen around the Super Bowl, which is like one of the biggest televised events on the planet, now we have the Oscars, and it just keeps, like, he keeps getting the hits. And then there was Will Ferrell and Anna Gasteyer, who also joked about this at the SNL 50th anniversary music showcase, which happened a couple weeks back, when they did a few lines of Not Like Us, and then they repeated the line about Drake being a pedophile.
Probably one of the highlights so far for a lot of us, I think, for the first part of the year. And like you sort of alluded to before, like, Kendrick Lamar is highly respected hip-hop artist, Pulitzer Prize winner. So in the category of cancel culture definitely being a real thing, Chris Brown won Best R&B Album and Dave Chappelle won Best Comedy Album at the Grammys. So everything that came out about them is definitely hurting their careers, and they are just suffering so much. The Grammys do that, but, you know, they have a history of awarding problematic people. Louis C.K. has won Best Comedy Album.
One of the guys who runs the Grammys has allegations against him. We haven't touched on that yet, but I started to go into that a couple of months ago. So the whole thing's from the top to the bottom is rife with controversy.
My personal opinion, I think award shows are bullshit to begin with and sort of corrupt across the board, but not to the degree that some of the Grammy stuff goes, especially with the higher-ups. And along the same lines, everybody remember the band Brand New?
No.
We did an episode
I don't want to.
Well, they're fucking back.
Great.
Just literally 2 days ago from the recording of this, they announced 3 shows upcoming in Texas, Kentucky, and Tennessee. And while Jesse Lacey went away for longer than most people do when allegations come out about them, apparently enough time has passed for his, quote, "I'm sorry, I was a sex addict," to make the grooming and assault of minors okay in a lot of people's minds, based on some of the comments I've read online, which make me want to throw my computer and phone against the wall.
Why do you think they picked those 3 states? Texas, Kentucky, and Tennessee. That seems like really weird for a comeback that a lot of like hardcore fans are definitely wanting to attend.
I mean, Texas, Kentucky, and Tennessee are pretty red, so you'd think maybe people are more forgiving in those places.
I just Googled age of minor in Texas to see maybe if it was like 15, but it's 18, so I'm just going to like not keep going down that rabbit hole.
I bet Kentucky is...
It probably is like 14.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Kentucky people, we love you too.
We love people in all states, everywhere.
And more bad news, Warped Tour is back. We had covered some of their bullshit on episode 63 last year, and unfortunately, they're back. They have announced, I think it's 3 different areas of the country that they're going to be hitting in 2025. Way they're going about it is different. They're doing a couple days in each place instead of doing kind of their traveling sideshow structure that they were known for before. The lineup so far is like pretty meh.
Yeah.
Aside from the MySpace era band Millionaires, who are playing all 3 of the events, which is like the only exciting part. Oh, also, Falling in Reverse is of course playing, which makes me very nervous.
Mm-hmm.
Anything Ronnie Radke is like, anytime he's like allowed out of the house, I get nervous for everyone else around.
Yeah.
It's not a person who's taken accountability for any actions. It doesn't seem like they've changed. They double down on their bullshit on a regular basis.
Lots of anti-trans comments, lots of shit like that still happening online. I started going through the lineups on each day, trying to like make notes of, first of all, how many people of color and women are involved.
Yeah.
You know, Fishbone's on there, Dance Hall Crashers, but there's definitely some eyebrow-raising choices where it's like, really? That person? Bringing them back? So, moving on from that, Neil Gaiman. Vulture put out an article on January 13th that detailed allegations by 8 women, including 4 who had previously spoken out in a podcast that came out that sort of covers just years-long pattern of abuse and taking advantage of fans and grooming. And a lot of it is really gross and disgusting. And of course, he denied it. And in that denial, he included the excuse of BDSM between consenting adults, which for some reason seems to be one of the go-to moves when abusers are called out for violent assault. They'll say, oh, I'm just into weird, freaky BDSM lifestyles that not everyone agrees with, but it's between consenting adults, so it was okay.
See, also Marilyn Manson.
Exactly. Yes. Another perfect example. One of the women who came forward was the babysitter of Gaiman and ex-wife Amanda Palmer's 5-year-old son. And there's some really troubling things in the article that pertain to him being in the room when some of this abuse took place. I definitely suggest people check out that Vulture article and also the podcast put out by Tortoise Media called Master, the allegations against Neil Gaiman. It's 7 episodes, 5 hours.
Next on the table, we've got Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni. So a little bit of backstory. Blake Lively, actress, married to Ryan Reynolds. Justin Baldoni, actor, director. They both starred in It Ends With Us. It's a story about domestic violence and a woman who's trying to kind of overcome that. The title, of course, also idea of like ending generational trauma, ending the lineage of bad behavior with the current couple. So it was noted during the red carpet premiere that Baldoni and Lively were just kind of like staying away from each other. There wasn't a lot of interaction, which, you know, as the 2 main stars of the movie, you're not used to seeing them not kind of, you know, hand in hand, close to each other, take some photos, red carpet style, right? So in December 20th, Blake Lively accused Baldoni of sexual harassment during the timeline when they were filming the movie. But in addition to that, she also added that he was strategically aiming to destroy her reputation. There was a 10-claim complaint that was filed with the state of California about a hostile work environment, sexual harassment claims that she had were in there. It was an 80-page complaint in total. It had supposedly damning text messages between Baldoni and I do want to cover this in detail at some point in time. It's something called a crisis communications specialist. Basically, it's a PR firm that handles musicians, artists, actors, actresses, you know, anyone in a crisis. So they are the ones who you contact when something bad about you is about to hit the public sphere. And what we watched on the non-Hollywood side of this is her claims of sexual harassment became public. He pushed back, said, no, that's not correct. There was some more evidence that got leaked to the public. People were able to see some of the text messages, see some recorded piece of like audio. And then everyone suddenly started hating her. It was very strange that people initially were like, this is interesting. And they, you know, either initially took her side or wanted to kind of look into more information. And then it just seemed like the majority of the public just flipped. And everyone started talking about, you know, she's not even a good actress. And I would see things in comments that were like, her hair is ugly. We're not talking about that. It doesn't matter what her hair looks like. It doesn't matter if she doesn't have hair. But as we can touch on in another episode or somewhere down the line, with this crisis PR, their entire goal is basically from top to bottom to slander this person, not just in regards to sexual harassment, not just in regards to whatever claims Blake Lively had lodged against Baldoni, but basically make people hate her as a human being. So everything she says does not sound truthful, and you don't even want to be on her side no matter what, because she's such an unlikable person, which is absolutely fucked, right? Because, like, if we think about this in the way that so many people who can rush to the defense of people who have been accused of allegations, they say, well, let the courts decide, and we need the court of public opinion, or let me see the facts. This is the exact opposite of that. They're literally forcing people's opinion to change based on nothing to do with the case at all.
It's very reminiscent of Johnny Depp, Amber Heard.
They did a hell of a job with Amber Heard and Johnny Depp, and it seems like with what's been going on here between Baldoni and Lively, they're flipping the script as well. It's not as blatantly in the news as it was probably about a month to maybe a month and a half or so ago, but it has not been settled yet. So it will continue to rise up every once in a while as the claims and the case moves through the system.
Something else that there is a lot to talk about that we're just going to sort of touch on 2 points for right now is the Diddy trial. A lot going on there. So much. This is another thing that it seems like every day there is something else coming out. The 2 things that we're going to touch on, the first one is there was the suit against Jay-Z and Diddy filed by Jane Doe, saying that the 2 of them raped her after an awards show when she was underage. That suit has been dropped, with the Jane Doe saying, quote, although I ultimately chose not to pursue them, I stand by my claims in the New York action and believe that I had a meritorious claim against Jay-Z, end quote. So this is not uncommon for victims of assault. We've talked about this before. For a variety of reasons, victims may choose not to go forward with their court cases. It could be because they don't want to relive painful memories in front of a courtroom. They don't want to go through the public harassment and abuse that can come with court cases of rape. One of the things she said was that she was intimidated by an investigator who was reportedly working for Jay-Z into retracting her statements of being raped. In addition to that, her parents were also approached together and separately by this same investigator. The Jane Doe said, quote, fear of intimidation and retaliation from Jay-Z and or his associates or fans is one of the reasons that I chose not to pursue the New York action and instructed my attorneys to dismiss it. I was not prepared to undergo years of attacks, intimidation, and harassment, and ultimately chose to dismiss my claims after certain negotiations among the attorneys involved in the New York action, end quote. So, just like I said, it doesn't mean that it didn't happen. It means it did happen. She just didn't want to go through potentially years of having to relive this and being retaliated against because people are fucking terrible. So what happened after that? Jay-Z is now suing this Jane Doe for malicious prosecution, abuse of process, civil conspiracy, and defamation, saying that Doe, quote, admitted that Mr. Carter did not assault her and that indeed it was her lawyer himself who pushed her to go forward with the false narrative of the assault by Mr. Carter in order to leverage a maximum payday, end quote. That never happened. This is all, according to her, made up by Jay-Z and his team. And in a stunning case of Darvo, not stunning at all, his team went on to attack the Jane Doe's credibility because of several mental health disorders, which if you were raped at 13, especially by some very famous people, yeah, you're going to have some mental health issues. Anyone who is a survivor of assault can talk about how that affects you mentally. They also said she suffers from financial and family hardships. Yeah, lots of survivors of rape and assault suffer from financial and family hardships because it affects every single part of your life. So it's just textbook Darvo behavior by his team, and nothing changes when it comes to this stuff. It's the same fucking playbook over and over.
And then the other thing that we wanted to talk about in regards to Sean Combs is that as of like a week or so ago, he lost one of the members of his legal counsel. Normally in these situations, high profile, you have 5, 6, 7, sometimes more members of a legal counsel, and they're all trained in different ways with the different skill sets of the law. So Sean Combs, lost one member of his legal counsel, and apparently that person was pretty predominant on the council. He held a lot of responsibility. His name was Anthony Rico. Rico's an interesting last name to have for someone who is Sean Combs right now, knowing what he has gone away for. So Anthony Rico has decided that he's no longer going to represent him. And he said, quote, "Although I have provided Sean Combs with the high level of legal representation expected by the court, under no circumstances can I continue to effectively serve as counsel for Sean Combs, consistent with the ABA standards for criminal justice." Okay. We're not sure what happened here. We don't have a lot. They're keeping themselves pretty tight-lipped about it. But we do know this is the same dude who once repped Osama bin Laden. Like, from beginning to end of that trial, this guy didn't bow out repping Osama. But, like, he's like, I can't do this shit with Puff Daddy. I just fucking can't. P. Diddy, no. So there must be some stuff in here. Like, when this thing actually hits and becomes public knowledge and people are able to follow what's going on, it's going to be wild. It's going to be really graphic. And I'm not saying this in like an enjoyment way because the things that happened are really sick. It kind of feels like it's an Epstein too in a way. I mean, it's affected so many people, so many young people, and so many higher ups that have taken part in some of these parties or, whatever the situation may be.
Now we're going to briefly touch on Alexander Westwood, which is someone that you may know about, you may not know about, depending on the shows that you watch, how knowledgeable you are about British actors. Myself, not at all knowledgeable. So this was something that was totally new to me and something that just kind of seemingly came out of nowhere. But this is one that's not getting as much press because he's not exactly a household name, like I said, unless you follow British actors. So here's the gist. Alexander Westwood is a British actor who appeared in multiple episodes of the Netflix show Sex Education. Why are we talking about him? He was recently sentenced to 15 and a half years in prison after being convicted of 26 sex offenses against 5 victims, including raping a 16-year-old, sexually abusing another teenager, and assaulting a child over an 8-year period from 2010 to 2018. According to prosecutor Andrew Wallace, this all happened under the guise as being an acting teacher, and as Wallace said, Westwood, quote, met 2 impressionable 16-year-olds and used his revered position to abuse them. And this happened over a several-year period, 10 years. I think is what it, like between 2010 and 2020 is when all of these allegations stem from. In one case, he convinced a girl to undress for a Greek mythology scene and then touched her breast and vaginal area. He was accused of pinning another of the victims down by her wrists until she bit him to escape. We'll link to the article at the bottom of our episode notes for this. Why is this important news, though? Why are we talking about it? Cases like this involving anyone, but let alone celebrities, don't often make it to the point of a 15 and a half year prison sentence or, sexually abusing and assaulting teenagers. More often than not, it ends like the Jay-Z case with the Jane Doe, where either the case gets dropped or people are found not guilty or acquitted, whatever. So this is important. This is big news. It would be great if more cases like this ended in this manner.
So we're trying to find uplifting news, but if that's what you're into, this is not it. Sorry. Andrew Tate is back in the United States, and that fucking sucks. Let's see. He was in Romania with his douchebag brother, where he was charged with rape and human trafficking and forming an organized crime group which sexually exploited women, which sucks. The brothers Tate, I guess, are wanted in the UK to face allegations of sexual assault once again, which of course they deny because it would never be anyone's fault, never their fault. They've also been accused of tax evasion in the UK. And back in December of last year, 2024, a British court ruled that police could go in and seize like $2.4 million from them for failing to pay taxes on 21 million pounds in revenue from their online businesses. So that being said, in case you need any backstory about why we think Andrew Tate is a giant piece of shit, he's a self-proclaimed misogynist. He's some sort of kickboxing world champ douchebag fuck. The only reason that he became famous in the first place is because he was on the British version of Big Brother back in 2016, where he only lasted 6 days because they removed him from the show after there was video evidence of him attacking a woman. And then he was like, of course, that's not what happened. I was set up. That seems to be like the Tate brother motto. Like if they had a crest of them, it was probably like boxing gloves and like, I don't know, them looking like douchebags. And then all around their crest, it would say, I was set up. Because they take no fucking accountability for anything they've ever done in their lives. And think about the term like self-proclaimed misogynist. If you Google like quotes from Andrew Tate, if I had 2 hours, read you all the misogynistic shit that he said that he thinks is like legitimate and kind of cool. He said women are intrinsically lazy and there's no such thing as an independent female. I'd like to curb stomp you. Just gonna calm myself down for a second. Fuck you so hard. He got banned off of numerous social media platforms over the years, including Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. Of course, was off X, but now he's back because Elon Musk is a bitch too. On Twitter, before he was banned, he said women should bear the responsibility for being sexually assaulted. So, like, not only does he refuse to take responsibility for any of his bullshit, he thinks women should take responsibility for men fucking up. Like, this is driving me insane, and I feel like I'm going to pull out my hair if I have to continue to talk about this, so let me get through the rest of this as fast as I can. In the past, he used extreme language relating to different acts of violence against women. In a text that was made public, he wrote to one woman, I love raping you. And like, just in case you're like, maybe that was like a thing. No, it wasn't a thing. They weren't like together like that. This is not some sort of like rape play fantasy between two people. This was just a fucking dick saying unapologetically cruel, horrible shit to a woman. And then, of course, and this is not shocking, it's just disappointing, he likes to claim that he's a force for good and all the things that he's doing are acting under the instruction of God to do good things. End quote. It's disgusting. And I can't stand it. And he and his brother were, as I stated, in Romania for, I think, the last 2 or so years. They were able to move throughout the EU at some point, but the lovely Trump administration decided to pop them onto a plane and bring them back to the US. This just recently happened a couple of days ago, so there's not a ton of information about why they're back in the US at this point. There is some conversation about the fact that the state of Florida is doing like a full-on investigation of them, which I don't know why we need that. We already have a lot of information about them. So we'll see. With the way things have gone over the last, I don't know what it's been, since January 20th, the world has kind of lit itself on fire, at least the United States version of the world. So I am not all in and supportive of the state of Florida, which I find to be one of the least trustworthy states in our 50 states in this union here in the United States, doing some sort of due diligence and investigating the Tate brothers. I'm very concerned that this is going to be a January 6th pardon redo kind of situation where these guys are going to be allowed to stay in this country or at least have some sort of leniency when it comes to their travel expectations. I don't like it. As you can tell, it really pisses me off.
I do think it's interesting that Ron DeSantis said they're not welcome in Florida.
Yeah.
But they're in Florida.
Right. That's what I find to be questionable.
Yeah, Andrew Tate is, I guess, at the top of that alpha male, like, pyramid. That's why so many young men are getting normalized to this behavior, because they're fucking listening to these awful, terrible human men.
It doesn't have to be this way. I don't understand why this is appealing. Treating other people like shit on purpose does not serve you unless you're a deeply traumatized individual who's decided to never try and right that and just wants to impart that feeling of inadequacy and inexcellence on everyone around them. I'm real feisty about this one. This might be my most upsetting one.
No, for sure. I 100% agree. And
I feel like some of the commentary he says is troll level. Like texting someone, "I love raping you," is some troll fucking shit. But also, he said so much of it for so long, and he's such a douchey alpha, bullshit bro, that I think he might actually have, if it started out as a troll, I think he's, doubled down and turned into this person, or he always has been. Either way, fuck him.
If it's troll behavior and you're sort of playing this character, at some point either you become the character or you were the character all along, and just using that as sort of a excuse for doing this trolly, shitty behavior.
So we will probably not do an update on them because I don't think I can get through talking about them for a full episode of Subtext because I will lose my shit.
No, absolutely not. In fact, I vote right now that this is the last time that we
ever talk about the Tate brothers.
Unless it's just in passing.
Or unless Florida really pulls it out and does something phenomenal for women.
Yeah.
And then we can talk about it then. But only then.
Yeah. Speaking of not being the good guy all along, RAINN, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, the National Sexual Violence Resource Center, and other organizations have deleted mentions of trans people from their websites. Why? Because of President Donald Trump and his executive order threatening to cut off funding for any organization that promotes gender ideology. For some reason, in the case of the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, this includes removing reports on male victims of child trafficking, which makes absolutely no fucking sense at all to me, how that falls under the promoting gender ideology heading.
You know who you could talk to about human trafficking?
Oh, you know what? Let's get Andrew Tate on this.
Let's get him as a guest. He can fill us in about all things human trafficking.
Totally. He's quite the expert from what I've heard.
That's right.
Now, while these organizations have removed mentions of trans and non-binary people from their websites, they still claim that their services are available to anyone. It doesn't make it seem that way, though. And it doesn't make these places seem very welcoming to trans people who need to get help from these places. It's just another sign of how fucking gross this presidency is and how they're just trying to erase trans and non-binary people from existence. It's just really hard to feel that things are going in a good direction or any sort of direction that's not completely down the fucking toilet when shit like this is just happening all the time, constantly now. It's real easy to get disillusioned.
And I'd love to say that we're ending the episode on a high note because we're talking about reality TV, and I fucking love crappy reality TV. It gets me out of the doldrums whenever things are, as Rich was saying, getting too much. Everything's just going south really fast, which is the state of how everything's been for the past so many months / years / decade at this point. normally I'd say, let's talk about Love is Blind, and I'd be very excited and wanted to like tell you all about this real stupid show that I like to spend a lot of my time invested in. I've watched all of the 8 seasons so far.
So, real quick before we get too into this, since the current season was filmed in Minneapolis,
yes,
have you recognized Minneapolis landmarks or like places that you have maybe? I know you haven't
Not
spent
too
a ton
much.
of time in Minneapolis, but
Yeah, so from what I understand, they do the beginning part of the show. So the idea of the show is like you talk to a person through like a wall. You don't know anything about them. You have hours and hours of these conversations doing kind of like a speed dating kind of thing with walls. And then you kind of pick who's your top, whatever. You don't know what they look like. You eventually decide, I'm in love with this person after like 3 to 5 days, which just to me seems asinine. But I move slower than that, I guess. And then they decide, yes, they're going to propose to each other. They're going to get married. And that's when they see each other for the first time. So all of that, to my understanding, takes place in Los Angeles in like a giant warehouse where they've constructed this kind of weird pod situation that they all like spend time in. Then once they pair off the couples, they go to a like resort in another country. This time it was Honduras. They spend time together, no phones, no nothing. They're just trying to get to know each other face to face now. And then eventually they fly back to wherever they're from. And as Rich said, this one's up in Minneapolis. So I've noticed they don't do a ton of aerial shots that I've noticed. And a lot of the stuff they do is like kind of date night stuff. So like bowling alleys and movies and eating at a bar with friends where they're finally meeting the parents or whatever. So it's not a lot of aerial shots, but I can tell like when they're walking around that it's Midwest. That's what I know. You can just tell by like looking at the other people. You're like, oh yeah, they're Midwest.
oh yeah.
I know my people.
You bring up bowling. The bowling alley that they shot at is
Yeah.
real close to where I used to live and a bar that I frequented all of the time when I lived in Minneapolis. So when I heard that they were filming there, I was like, oh, that's funny. I've spent many a night in that place.
Well, good thing you're not on camera.
Yeah.
So now that we've gotten all the fun part of the show out of the way, when I was talking to a friend, texting him that I was starting season 8, he was like, oh, have you heard of the allegations from the one guy on the show? And I was like, no, I haven't. So I just started. So I started Googling and I found out that there were allegations from one of the characters named Alex. And not a character. He's a person. He's a real person. But he's not a character to me because he lives in my TV. So with Alex, it's a person who makes it into one of the paired couples. So you see him for a while. And apparently something came up on Reddit once I think the show started airing, if not, maybe once the people in the show formally announced on either Instagram or online that they were going to be in the new season of the show. What got brought up is that Alex, apparently, according to this person on Reddit, he used to, allegedly, purchase alcohol for minors, would ask them inappropriate questions, would text them all the time, get their phone numbers, invite them to parties. So he had a real affinity for people under the age of 21, possibly under the age of 18. I went through the Reddit post and read everything. I believe that the original post has been taken down, but there's a couple others that have spun off from that one. One of the quotes from Reddit specifically stated, quote, "Will not be making a video, but Alex used to throw parties in his 20s and would invite only high schoolers, was 16/17 underage drinking, while he was banging my friend," end quote. And another person on Reddit added, "Can verify this story. He was best friends with my best friend for a decade, and he prefers his girlfriends to, quote, dress and act young." A third one on Reddit said, quote, "This guy was ripped to shreds on local dating Facebook groups in Minnesota because he would sell alcohol to minors and then ask for sexual pleasures from them. Apparently he has dated many and was a narcissist as well. The sweet personality was always his first step. The post occurred even before he was announced to be on the show. All posts were taken down because he started to get a lot of heat once he was announced at the reunion." At this time, no one specifically come forward to identify him directly. These were all posts made through, screen names on Facebook or whatever, and then some things through the local groups as well. But no one formally has come forward with full-on allegations of this is what happened to me. So I read all of that, and I thought that was definitely interesting. I responded to my friend who had asked about if I'd heard about the allegations. I was like, "Oh, you mean Alex?" And he was like, "No, Ben." which is a completely other different guy from the show. So there's two guys on the show who have allegations. I, at the time, had just started the show. Now I'm to the end of it, so I know what's going on with Ben. Ben, another one of the people on the show, also has allegations that actually came out during the episode of the show. In one of the episodes, and I don't want to ruin the whole timeline for any of y'all, but like, the person that he's interested in sees on their phone that there's a TikTok that was made by someone from Minneapolis who states that Ben is manipulative, that they were dating at some point and he did all these different things to her, and that he was, cruel to her, that he ghosted her, that he blocked her. Nothing's like, no severe allegations were lobbed at that point. It was a little bit more of like, hey, this guy's a giant turd. He sucks really bad. But one of the things that I thought was interesting was that when the conversation between Ben and the person that he chose on the show, he said that this person who made the TikTok was, quote, making stuff up, how I manipulated her and did all these things. And then he claimed that she was overreacting and that they'd been friends a few years earlier, but they never hooked up and it was a short amount of time and he doesn't remember anything. And he did recall ghosting her, but he doesn't remember anything that happened. And the woman that he has chosen on the show said, why is she crying in the TikTok if you just ghosted her? That doesn't make a lot of sense. The whole time that this thing is recorded, that this whole thing plays out on reality TV, which of course we know has a lot of cuts in it and can be made to seem like something more or less than it really is. I will say that this woman that he's speaking with, the one that he's chosen on from the show, is really astute to like how he's responding to this. She does not like the way that he said, like, kind of dismissed this woman and was just like, oh, she's overreacting. And you can see her face in that moment where she was like, is she though? Like, why would you say that? And then asking like, hey, why is she crying if you just ghosted her from 4 years ago? Like, that doesn't make a lot of sense. I know if I got ghosted 4 years ago by some dude that I supposedly barely knew, I wouldn't be making a TikTok about it and crying, even if that person became mega famous. It's not really worth that much to me. So I think maybe something happened here more. The show doesn't really go into it. There's still some episodes that haven't been dropped yet. I don't know that they're going to touch on this or not. But this Ben issue is small potatoes compared to whatever the fuck is going on with Alex. And so while I was reviewing all of this, I actually found out that Love is Blind characters, or cast members, I guess, there's a history of this. In a bunch of the seasons, there's been problematic people, and the show really just never mentions any of this at all. Apparently, in season 7, and I didn't pick up on this, like I said, I watched all the seasons, there's a couple that got together, and they just kind of like disappeared from being followed around on the show at one point. And I guess it's because a person, one of the man of this couple, ended up having these severe allegations against him. Once again, when he was announced as a person on the show, they edited him out so these allegations wouldn't need to be addressed in more of a public forum. According to what happened with him, they were allegations of sexual assault from a quote-unquote terrified ex, which seems like a lot. He was accused on a Facebook group where women warn each other about men from DC and all of their red flags. It was one of those groups that's like, are we dating the same man? And in the post, the woman stated that she matched with this person a few years ago, and they ended up going on some dates and hooking up and whatever. And they were drinking and hanging out one night, and then things started to get super aggressive. And that the two of them apparently had had rough sex before, but at that time she did not consent. And she got to the point where she couldn't breathe and she was terrified and crying. And then he apparently apologized, and she was like, too little too late. Like at that point, it's gotten to the point where you're physically hurting someone. And also they never consented to any of this. So there's comments from him online. They've talked back and forth about this, I guess. She apparently had to change her number because he kept calling, trying to apologize. But yeah, so he's one of the people that has had some problems on the show. Season 5, there were 2 people where the woman stated that the participant sexually assaulted her during the honeymoon portion, where I said they go off to like another country in the sun. Apparently she was sexually assaulted. So in season 6, there was a Love is Blind participant whose ex accused him of threatening to show revenge porn to her son. So this list kind of goes on and on. Some of it gets brought up in the show sometimes, but very minutely. They are following around like, 4 to 8 different couples, I think. So they're able to cut these things real thin and make them seem like not that much of a big deal. But if you Google Love is Blind allegations, there's like a laundry list of shit that comes up. And that's kind of scary when you think about the fact that the show has like, at the beginning, maybe 20 people. It's usually 10 males, 10 females, I think. And for the last 4 seasons, there's been some sort of major issue with at least one of the cast members. It's getting to be a little bit much that they can't find people who don't have sexual allegations against them.
Fucking crazy. I mean, that said, I bet you could go through any sort of reality dating show and just Google allegations.
That's true.
Whatever, season whatever. But to have like that many in that short amount of time is...
I mean, I just thought it was wild that my friend was like, hey, did you hear about the allegations in season 8? And I was like, oh, this dude? He's like, no, this dude.
No, the
and I was
other
like,
dude.
There's 2? Oh my God.
I wish I could be like, that's so shocking for like Minneapolis people to be...
It's not Minneapolis because all the other seasons have it too.
No, I know. And then I was like, I know women who date in Minneapolis. That's fucking par for the course. Par for the course anywhere.
Yeah. So that was what we thought was going to be a brief news update for you via Subtext. It didn't turn out to be so brief, but that's just because so much has happened. Some good, some bad, some stuff where we're just going to have to see what happens in the future. We'll continue to kind of update you guys with some of these larger scale stories as we go. I think it's really important to keep tabs on these things. Overall, we hope that you guys like the newer format. Let us know what you think. You can always email us at thisisenoughpodcast@gmail.com or find us on Instagram at enough.podcast.
I'm glad you remembered what it was because of you.
It took me a second.
Enough is a podcast centering on surviving abuse, harassment, and assault in the music scene. To help get the word out, please like and subscribe and share with your friends. In 2025, we are interested in talking to teachers, authors, artists, activists, counselors, community organizers, and anyone else who is dedicated to making a positive impact in their music community and our society as a whole. If that sounds like you, please reach out to us at thisisenoughpodcast@gmail.com.